don't
How
know.
small can it be? Matt Cook here with Jonathan Green. We've got some questions that we found around and about, and I wanted to share them with you. I think you'll find it very entertaining. And we just started getting to the first one. Do you want to ask your question, Jonathan, or we can delve into the answer?
Yeah, I saw a really amazing message came in from a lady that I thought was very interesting, which is really, I don't want to read the whole thing because it's pretty intense, but let's summarize it as basically that she feels like they're not physically compatible. And actually, I have a true story about this, so I'm giving you that. So I had a friend in my who, when I was around early 20s, late teens, and she was like, I met this guy. He was so hot. He had such a great personality, but it was so small when we were doing stuff. It's like I couldn't feel anything, and I did. He was having an amazing time. He was trying so hard, which is like kind of the last thing a guy wants to hear. Which he was like he was giving his best effort, and I think she just like didn't know what to do, right? Because it's like, how can I stay with someone? And my first thought was like, I didn't even know women could have orgasms. So I was like, what do you even talk about? Women enjoy sex? I've never heard of that. So I had to go through several revelations. I was like, what do you mean? Why does that matter? Who does it matter for? It's not for you. So there was a lot I had to learn over the last 20 years, but what happens from the woman's side and the man's side, if you're a man who's in that situation, and it's also, interesting to me. Everyone thinks that bigger is better. Like if there was a surgery for it, every guy would have a 4 foot long one, right? Which no woman can handle. So how big do you actually want to be, and like does it matter? So it seems like, I don't know, have people always put this much importance on size, or is it something that's kind of just happened in the last 20 years? And what do you do from the woman's side, and what do you do from the guy's side?
People have started emphasizing this a lot because of the beginning of readily accessible high-speed video porn. That's basically it. So in the old days, I don't know if you remember this. Maybe you're too young for this. Maybe you aren't. But we had to go to a what do they call those? A porn movie
Adult
theater.
movie
instead of
theater.
porn, Blue Movies or something like that. Adult movie theater. I actually had a friend who was a traveling porn salesman at one time. So he would get his reels and he'd put them in his big Eldorado Cadillac in the trunk, and then he'd go to different towns, and then he'd make a deal with the theater, and they'd show this porn until the police shut them down, and then he'd go to the next town. But then porn, the internet really started. As soon as the internet started getting big, which was from 1994 on, that's when the internet really started to get big. Before that, nobody knew what the internet was. Porn was sort of a thing, and it was a bigger and a bigger thing, of course. And by around 2003, there was very, very available high-speed video porn, meaning videos that you could watch on your computer. I had a friend who was a executive at one of these really large adult magazines. I'm not going to say which one, but he was the marketing vice president, and he said that what was killing their business were the amateurs who were making porn movies for free, basically. And at that point, these very large companies started getting, grew and grew and grew, offering this video porn, and it's just everywhere now. And basically, it's like this. I used to do a lot of weightlifting, and I studied bodybuilders. And a lot of guys wanted to copy what these bodybuilders were doing in the gym, and then they would get injured because they were trying to copy somebody who was very genetically gifted to have a certain body and be able to lift certain weights and all of that. So you had to think about like normal people versus bodybuilders, and you had to go, well, let me go slow with these weights. Let me just be very careful. I'm not like that 1 in a million genetically gifted guy there. I'm just a normal guy. I have to do things differently. With porn, you're seeing the 1 in a million guys who have 20-inch dicks, and they're in the porn movies. As a result, both women and men have gotten unrealistic expectations. In addition to that, because of the availability of click, 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 you go from one thing to another thing to another thing, there's this unbelievable novelty. What it causes us to happen in our brains is we get desensitized to just normal sex. And a lot of men and women aren't even that interested in normal sex because they're so wired for porn. So we've seen these men with these giant penises. We've seen this robotic sex, all this sort of novelty shit. When I was very young, like hardly anybody would ever do anal, for example. I mean, some people did, but not much. But now it's like everybody's doing anal because they've seen it in porn. They've seen all these things in porn, and then they think that's what normal people do. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it particularly, but I think that it increases this dissatisfaction with real people that we interact with when we're having sex, because we are wired to the screen, to the pixels. and then we have sex with a real person, and it's completely a letdown. And this is probably one of the worst things about porn, is the expectations that it creates, the dissatisfaction that sows, because we're always comparing what we have seen in our imagination or what we see in the video to what we see in bed with us. And what we see in bed with us never, quote, measures up to to what we imagine and what we see in those movies. That's a really good reason to avoid porn. It's a really, really good reason to avoid porn. It's very, very toxic and poisonous to ordinary sexuality, but we're far beyond that. It used to be men watched a lot of porn. Now women watch porn too. I mean, I think it's probably maybe 80% of men are watching porn and maybe 60% of women. I mean, it's a lot of women are watching porn. So they are not happy with a guy that has an ordinary 5.2 inch unit. And by the way, that is about the average. There was a thing one time that said 6 inches was the average, but it's not. There's actually very good studies that I've seen that it's really around 5.2 to 5.4 inches. You know, somebody who's shorter and people that are shorter, like live in other countries where they're just generally shorter, will have more diminutive units. But in general, it's not 6 inches, it's like 5.2, 5.4 inches. That means that half the men are bigger and half are smaller. There's also a condition called micropenis, which is a very, very small penis that never grew, or never grew very much. And those men, some of them are having surgery. There's different things that they're doing. I mean, but it's rare. It's rare. It's quite common, you know, for men to be on a spectrum of size. And I think what's interesting about this this question is that she says, I feel nothing. That's what she says. I feel nothing. When we have sex, I feel nothing. And you know how awkward that is when they, meaning the guy, is having an amazing time and you're just laying there. Now, I was thinking as a guy, have you ever had sex with a woman that was just laying there and wasn't really very engaged in it at all? Well, I think we have been there, right? We've all been there, I think. Would you say, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's called, when she's lying there like a starfish, you call it a starfish. Like there's just the arms and legs there, but there's no movement. I think what you're saying is very important, which is that, and this is something that is a lot to think about, is if the barrier between reality and fantasy has broken for a lot of people. Because for me, anything I see in adult movies, the kind of thing I would never want to do that in my real life. Like there's a huge barrier, right? Like, so to me, and it sounds like, and maybe that's not the case anymore for a lot of people. So it's kind of something I'm thinking about, is that like, you know, like if my wife walked in and I saw me seeing something during a movie, she goes, "You want me to do that?" I'm like, "Of course not." That's why I'm like, there's a huge difference between something I would watch in a movie and something I would want to do with a person in real life. But it sounds like more and more the two worlds are merging. Like so many guys shave everything in their downstairs or get waxed. And then there's this need to, like every position in adult movies is bad. The positions they choose are not for pleasure, but for camera angle, right? For visual. And if you're following that pattern, then of course there's gonna be tons of problems. So of course, if you're doing bad positions, right? I wonder if that's also combined with, she's like, hey, do a position that's good for a camera angle instead of a position that's good for pleasure. And of course you're gonna get less pleasure. So what do you think about that? In addition to, because we kind of talking about this other issue, do you think that the barrier has broken between fantasy and reality for a lot of people?
Well, it certainly has. I mean, they're wired to fantasy rather than reality, but I want to point out that women, especially younger women today, are very used to very rough sex, whether it's through their poor masturbation practices and so forth. So I've had guys that have gotten ED from dealing with women, younger women, who are just want it so rough, and it eventually messes up their penis and their sensitivity also. So a lot of them are also sort of wired to imaginary fantasy and stuff, and when they're having a real sexual experience, they feel very, very little. And it's what I call desensitization. And it's an actual thing where the brain and the genitals are not really listening very well and talking to each other very well. So women suffer it, and men do too. But the fact that she's just laying there, I mean, maybe she's not really very attracted to this person, I think. She says they're not sexually compatible. So maybe she's just laying there and she's doing a disservice to both of them. They shouldn't really be together. Now, I would just say, if you want to have good intercourse and a man doesn't have a very large unit, one thing you can do is to put a pillow under her butt if you're doing missionary, lifts her hips up, and then it gets much deeper penetration.
That's one of my big moves. That's like a secret move.
Oh, I gave away the secret.
Why are you telling everyone that? That's literally like the game changer move I have. That I, and the girls
It's
are like,
a good one.
wow, I've never experienced that before.
Because
I'm
they'll
like,
go in deeper that way than you would be otherwise. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, yeah, you don't see this in porn movies because they don't want to ruin their pillow, but it's like, that's probably one of my most biggest secret moves. I can't believe you just told it to everyone. That's literally been like my big move for 20 years. Everyone's like, wow, how did you think of that? Well, I'm a genius, obviously.
So she says she wants to be able to feel it. And I'm just saying that a lot of women don't feel very much. And the solution to that is they have to stay away from fantasy and porn. They have to kind of go through what a lot of the guys are called nofap on the subreddits and on some websites. Basically, they have to kind of just focus on real sex and avoid fantasy and avoid porn. And eventually she'll regain more sensitivity again, and she'll be able to appreciate a guy. Right now, she doesn't. And of course, like we said, she's comparing what the guy has with what she's seen in porn. So that's kind of very sad, really, very difficult.
So there's a lot of things I can do in the bedroom, but there's one thing I can't do, which is vibrate. And that's something my body just physically can't do. I don't have that ability. My question is, how do I kind of deal with this issue? Because I also found a lot of women, they're either totally desensitized to it, like they can't finish unless there's that action, or they have the issue where it's like they're so numb from doing that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. If women are using vibrators, that tells you that they're going to feel very little from penis and vagina type sex. It's just the way it is. A lot of women don't have orgasms from intercourse anyway. Most women don't really. The only way they do is if woman is on top and she can rub her clitoris against your pubic bone, and she can a lot of women will have an orgasm that way, even if they are used to vibrators. And of course, oral sex, giving her oral sex. But most women don't have a orgasm with penetration anyway, actually, ordinary, unless they're on top, as I said, and kind of running the show that way. So that's pretty typical. For some reason, God made women with their clitoris in sort of a little different place than the penis goes. So that's how it is. So I hope that answers your question. I wanted to mention we have a sponsor for this, which is Urgent Libido Assist. And a lot of men want to have a higher drive and a higher libido. Urgent Libido Assist was designed by Dr. Ari McGill, who's a medical doctor, board certified. He created a number of things in it, such as Shilajit, that are known to help support healthy, higher testosterone levels and to increase a man's libido and to potentially lower estrogen levels in the body. So they have a special, where there's a link here that you can see. You can follow the link, and it's 58% off, so you can give it a try. And they think that you'll love it and you'll want to keep using it. And I think you'll just love Urgent Libido Assist. So I highly recommend that you give it a try. Just follow the link, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you on our next video.